Rob Mayzes here, talking to you today for Untitled Chapter about microphone placement for recording voice, whether that's recording a voiceover, recording voice for video, when you've got the mic positioned just off screen, it doesn't matter, but any situation where you're recording voice, microphone placement is essential. It's probably the biggest variable in the tone and the character of the voice that you record. Of course, microphone choice also has a big impact. And I've already written an article about that, so you can go check that out on Tuts Plus. But aside from microphone choice, the distance that you are from the microphone, as well as the height of the microphone and the axis of the microphone, can have a big impact on the sound that you record. Just to give you a tiny demonstration now before we continue. Obviously, at the moment, I'm facing the camera more and I'm talking slightly off axis. Now, as I turn towards the microphone, you can hear an instant change in the tone and the character of my voice. And as I turn back again, you can hear it changes again. And that's a really small movement there. That's only a few, 20-degree change, and that makes a huge difference in sound. So as soon as you start playing with distance as well, you can have a lot of control over the tone that you receive. Now, first of all, how far away should you be from the microphone? Well, it all depends really on what tone and sound you want to capture. There's no right or wrong answer. However, you can be too close and you can be too far away. With cardioid microphones, this is a cardioid microphone here, they exemplify something called the proximity effect. And what this means is, again, this only applies to cardioid, the closer you get to the microphone, the more it exaggerates the bass. So the microphone actually adds an artificial element of bass to the sound. It's not natural bass, it's artificial due to the way that the capture in the microphone is capturing the sound around it. So if you get too close to the microphone, if it's a cardioid, you start to get a really exaggerated bass, a really kind of woolly sound. Sometimes it sounds really unnatural because it sounds like people have got a bit of a blocked nose because it's exaggerating the bass so much. So that's too close. You can use it to your effects. A lot of people like to do this with an old school MD41 or an SM7B, really great classic radio and voiceover mics. You get up 1 or 2 inches away and you get that really exaggerated bass. So if you want to achieve it as an effect, that's fine. But if you want to get a natural sound, that's too close. On the other end of the scale, you can be too far away, especially if you're not in a studio or a treated room. If you're recording at home or on location or in a classroom, anywhere where it's not treated to sound good, the further you get away from the mic, the more of the room the mic's going to capture as opposed to your voice. If you can imagine, when you're talking in a room, the voice doesn't just go directly to the microphone. It bounces off all the walls around you, it bounces off the environment around you, shelves, computers, bookcases, all interact with the sound differently. And the further you are away from the microphone, the less it's capturing your voice, but it's still capturing the room at the same rate. And this is called the signal to noise ratio. So when I back up off the mic, you can hear the volume of my voice drops. But obviously the noise in the environment and the way that my voice is interacting with the room stays at the same volume. So when you boost the volume up, you're also boosting the background noise and the room sound. So when I get closer to the microphone, my voice has got louder, but the background level has stayed the same. So I don't have to turn the track up as much, therefore I'm not boosting the background level as much. So in essence, the further away you are from the microphone, the more of the room you capture. And in a studio or a good sounding room, you might want to do this because you might want to capture a really nice room sound. But normally in a home environment, or if you're recording on location, if you get too far away, you start to get more of the room. It starts to make your voice less intelligible because you're hearing more of the reverb than the direct voice. It starts to make it harder to understand what you're saying, and it starts to add that delay, reverb, kind of echo sound. So that's too far and too close. Now, there are no rules. There is no exact distance that will work every time. You need to experiment, and this is the key here. You need to experiment, use a bit of trial and error whenever you're recording a new environment, or you're recording a new person, or recording with a new microphone. You need to press record And keep talking as you slowly back away from the microphone, and keep talking, and then come closer to the microphone. Keep talking, come closer, come closer. Have a listen back to that and see where it sounds best, and that'll give you a rough idea. And of course, you can go much further back than that, and you can get even closer just to try absolutely everything. Having said that, there is a really good guideline starting point if you want to get an overall natural sound, and that's 5 inches. So 5 inches is about here. You get a really nice natural sound. It's not too close to show the proximity effect. It's not too far away to capture a lot of the room. A lot of the sound when you're speaking comes from your chest. So at this distance, the microphone's still capturing the sound of my chest, not just my voice. Whereas when I get too close, you lose the chest and instead you get that artificial voice. So back to around 5 inches is a really good starting point. From there, you can go back to around 12 inches. And I'd say this is another good kind of starting point if you want a more open, roomy sound. If you imagine a megaphone coming out of your mouth that was 12 inches long, a cone shape coming out of your mouth, as long as the microphone is within that area, you're going to get quite a good sound. So as long as it's not too off axis that the cone of my mouth would be facing over here, and as long as it's not too high or low, that's going to be fine. And if it's 12 inches long, that's kind of the outer perimeter. So once we start getting past 12 inches and we start to get further around 20 inches, that's when we start to get a lot more of the room sound, which you should be able to hear now. So 5 inches for a closer, more personal, but still natural sound. And then 12 inches for a more open, roomy sound. Start from there and experiment, have a listen, but you can never go wrong if you use one of those guidelines. Of course, the other variable is height, another really important one. At the moment, you can see the microphone's pretty much pointing directly at my mouth. It's a bit higher so that it forces me to open my chest. But what you can do, a good guideline, if you want to, again, get a natural sound, is to have the mic at about eye level, because again, this forces the speaker to open their chest a bit more and raise their mouth. If anything, I've actually got it a bit too low here. So it'd be nice if it was a bit higher, and then it would force me to open my chest. On the other end of the scale, if you go lower, I'm just going to adjust this. If you have the mic pointing lower, more towards the chest, you're going to capture a lot more of the chest, which is where the bass of your voice comes from. So you should be able to hear it. It's a bit less clear, a bit less top end. Sounds a bit muffled in comparison, but you can hear a bit more natural bass. On the other end of the scale, if it's too high, you start to get, again, more of a room sound. You don't get as much of the bass, and it's not really capturing the source properly because it's pointing over my head, especially when you're using a cardioid. So it's actually capturing more of the reflection of the wall behind me and less of my direct voice. So again, back to here, around eye level, forces me to open up and gets a nice natural sound. But go a bit lower if you want to make someone with a slightly weak voice. If you want to add a bit more bass, you can go a bit lower and point more towards their chest. And then lastly, we have axis, which of course I showed you before, because you can hear it, this whole video, you can hear the difference of the axis. Now, the only really good reason that you'd want to use off-axis microphone placement is if you're getting a lot of plosives or sibilants. So if you're getting a lot of P's that are disrupting the microphone, that's why I've got a pop shield. But if they're still getting through or you don't have a pop shield, you can position the mic slightly off axis so that the air that comes out your mouth when you're saying a word with P in it, instead of going into the microphone, it's going over here, so it's not disrupting the microphone. Same with sibilants. Another good trick, if you have a large diaphragm condenser, which unlike this one, they'd be side addressed. They're the bigger ones, where instead of pointing at them, you point it like that. You can have them upside down, eye level, and again, this means that the mouth isn't actually going into the microphone because the microphone's just at eye level, so it's going underneath. So that's another way you can use off-axis microphone placement to reduce plosives and sibilants. So the main thing to remember is that you need to experiment. Start off with 5 inches, or between 5 and 12. I'd say at home 12 is probably a bit too far. If you're in a really nice room or a studio, you could go nearer 12, but I'd start around 5 inches. Then try 1 or 2, see if the proximity effect works for your voice. You can get even closer here, and you can hear the difference that makes. But don't forget that when you get too close, it does sound a bit unnatural. You start to get a bit more of a breathy sound because you're so close to the microphone. And then if you're too far, you hear more of the room. It's harder to hear what the person's saying because you're hearing just as much of the room as you are their actual voice. So there you go. My action steps for you now after watching this video is to get out your microphone, place it in the middle of your room, and I want you to just talk. I like to use the phrase, the quick brown fox jumps over a lazy dog, because that's got every letter of the alphabet. Just repeat something over and over and walk around the microphone, move back, move closer to it, try getting really close, try getting really far, then listen back and kind of hear how much of a difference microphone placement can make. And then remember where it sounded good, because next time you don't need to experiment as much if you're recording the same person in the same room, because you already know what works. You can put the microphone roughly where it worked and get going straight away. So thanks for watching. Until next time.